Welcome to this explainer. If you've been following the tech space lately, you know the AI boom is absolutely massive. But here's something wild. Beneath all those incredible software breakthroughs, there is a hidden physical choke point that almost no one is talking about. It's literally a hardware bottleneck threatening to cap how far artificial intelligence can actually go. So today we're unpacking exactly what that choke point is and the invisible supercycle it's creating right now.
Think about the last 18 months or so. We've been celebrating these mind-bending parameter counts, multimodal capabilities, and off-the-charts reasoning benchmarks, right? But pause for a second. What is the dirty secret hiding inside every single AI press release? Like, what's fundamentally missing from all this hype? Well, the engineers actually building these massive systems, they're losing sleep over something surprisingly physical.
The answer? Light. Yep, specifically photonics. See, modern AI training clusters use thousands of GPUs working in parallel, and they have to exchange terabits of data every single second. The absolute crucial point here is how you move that data fast enough between the chips so they don't just, melt from the heat or sit there completely useless waiting for information. You literally have to move that data at the speed of light.
And to put the financial stakes of this shift into perspective, just look at this number, $130.6 billion. That is the projected size of the global photonics electronics convergence market by 2033. Right now, we're sitting at about $26 billion. That's a staggering five-fold market expansion in just 8 years. This isn't some speculative sci-fi concept, it's a massive infrastructure shift being actively deployed by the biggest tech companies on the planet right this second.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The physics upgrade. Moving past copper.
We really need to understand why the entire AI industry is being forced to execute this massive hardware upgrade. For decades, we connected chips using copper. It's cheap, we understand it, it's everywhere. But copper has officially hit a physical wall. At the crazy bandwidth densities AI requires, copper just creates way too much heat, suffers from massive signal loss, and draws an unacceptable amount of power. Photonics, on the other hand, replaces that copper with light. It sends data across the nanodistances of a data center instantly with highly efficient energy usage and incredibly low latency.
But this technology doesn't just stop at replacing the cables. There is a critical architectural shift happening right under our noses. Historically, we used pluggable transceivers. Those are external optical modules connected by external cables. But the new gold standard? That's co-packaged optics, or CPO. This is where the optical engines are integrated directly onto the silicon die itself. To give you an idea of why this is such a game changer, this shift to CPO is expected to deliver 5 times better power efficiency for next-generation NVIDIA chips. 5 times.
Moving on to Section 2, Supply Chain Choke Points, zooming in.
So, where's the actual catch in all this? Well, the real supply constraints aren't at the final assembly line. They're buried deep upstream. Let's play detective for a minute and look at these layers. Layer 0 starts with indium phosphide substrates, which is a material way harder to manufacture than standard silicon. Then Layer 1 involves growing compound semiconductor layers on those substrates, which we call epi-wafers. And finally, Layer 2 is turning those into the actual continuous wave lasers. This deep, complex stack, this is exactly where the true invisible moats of the AI revolution live.
Let's look a bit closer at that top layer, the continuous wave, or CW laser. By definition, this is the critical, coherent light source absolutely required to build co-packaged optics. You simply cannot build CPO without it. And here is a startling fact for you. Market demand is currently outstripping CW laser supply by about 30%. Let that sink in. That is a structural shortage of the single most critical component for our entire AI optical infrastructure.
And parallel to this photonics shift, there's another hardware revolution going on: advanced packaging. Today's AI chips are pulling over 1,000 watts of thermal power. That is insane. Traditional organic substrates simply warp and crack under that kind of extreme heat. So the industry's solution? Glass. Glass substrates offer perfect structural integrity and superior electrical precision. They just don't warp, which is honestly the only way we're keeping Moore's Law alive as these chips get hotter and denser.
Section 3. The economics of integration. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is
How companies actually make money off these bottlenecks. The biggest economic prize doesn't just go to whoever supplies the raw materials. Look at this margin expansion. Raw epi wafers yield about 30 to 40% gross margins. Not bad.
But if you process that into a laser chip, you jump to 40 to 55%. And if you can vertically integrate the whole shebang and build a complete transceiver module, you're capturing 45 to 65% margins. Basically, the further up the stack a company moves, the more exponentially profitable they become.
Which brings us to Section 4, who controls the market? Let's take a neutral look at the chessboard here.
There are 4 key companies operating with some really unique competitive moats in this space, supplying the picks and shovels, so to speak. We have Lumentum, LPKF, Applied Optoelectronics, and IQE. Now, we're not taking sides or endorsing any of these stocks, we're just mapping out the current landscape based on the data.
First up, the heavyweights. Lumentum's position is pretty staggering. Their manufacturing capacity for these critical AI components is literally sold out through the end of 2028. NVIDIA actually wrote them a $2 billion check just to guarantee their own supply. That right there is what a supply-constrained monopoly looks like in practice. Meanwhile, LPKF Laser holds a massive, roughly 80% market share in glass substrate qualifications thanks to their patented processing technology. They are basically the gateway to this new glass era.
Next, we have the crucial execution-dependent challengers. Applied Optoelectronics is attempting to build America's largest in-house CW laser fab, and they've raised their 2026 revenue guidance to over $1 billion. Huge growth targets there. Then there's IQE, which is effectively the invisible floor for the entire Western epi-wafer market. They actually just secured a £45 million strategic lifeline from MACOM simply because the upstream supply chain literally cannot afford to let them fail.
And finally, Section 5, the fallback scenario and risks.
Look, we have to ground all this excitement in reality. What happens if the music stops? The threats to this thesis are very real. The biggest technological risk is silicon photonics eventually displacing these expensive indium phosphide components. There's also objective geopolitical fragility. China recently placed indium phosphide on its export control lists. Plus, if the big tech hyperscalers suddenly cut back their massive data center spending, that upstream demand just vanishes. We could also see slower integration timelines. And of course, extreme valuation risk. With some top players trading at 85 times forward earnings, any slight stumble in growth could be devastating.
But bringing it all back together, to quote the research, the next generation of AI runs on light. The companies that make the light, grow the crystals, and drill the holes are sitting at the most asymmetric supply chain in semiconductors today. This really reinforces the idea that photonics isn't just some passing fad. It is an absolutely mandatory physical upgrade for the entire ecosystem.
This whole hardware revolution is actively scaling, creating monumental shifts as light finally overtakes copper. The technology has already won the architectural battle. So, as we wrap up this explainer, the big question is, did you get there before the institutions did? Keep